Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I've got a quick productivity tips video on Angular unit testing. So just a few short tips that I wanted to share. I'll probably have more tips in a future video, but these are specific to some unit testing patterns that I like to follow in pretty much all of my projects, all of my Angular projects. So let me start off by kind of showing you what our app looks like at the moment. I've got this page component, and the page component pulls in the section component. So you see this app section here. If we take a look at the section component, we'll see that it has a service. It has a section service. And if you look at the section service, you'll see it has a dependency on the HTTP client. So it's a pretty typical setup for an Angular app. So our problem is when we run our unit tests, we're going to see some errors or warnings in the output here. And I like to treat errors and warnings as, failures in my unit tests. If you ignore these types of things, eventually every time you run your tests, you just see like a wall of errors and warnings, and it starts to make it difficult to, keep track of your tests. So what people often do when they see this error, app section is not a known element, is they come into their unit test and they add it so that it knows what it is. Seems like a logical thing to do. So I've declared my section component, and now it should know what that is, and it should pass, right? Well, there's another problem that's going to come up here. I can foresee that it's going to now complain about the HTTP client not being a known provider. And that's because the HTTP client is a dependency of the section component. So now I have to import that so that it knows how to provide it. And so finally, when I run my tests here a third time, they should pass, but at the expense of now this parent having to know about its children and its children's dependencies in order to pass without warnings and errors. And I don't like that. This can lead to some very complex tests and having to import and declare a bunch of things that don't matter to this component. The only thing that this component should care about is, unit testing its units, its functionality here, like this get test method should be tested. But it shouldn't have to know anything about the section component. It's the section service, which uses the HTTP client. I consider that an anti-pattern. So don't do this. What I recommend is to just use a schema called No Errors Schema. You can import this directly from Angular Core. So you'll see right here that got imported from Angular Core. Let me get rid of this old stuff. And now, without defining that section component and without having to import the HTTP client testing module, my test should pass without any errors and without any warnings. So I am talking about unit tests here. If you want to write some integration tests using your spec files and your Karma config, you can do that. You can have integration tests, and in those cases, you probably want to declare those things. But for the most part, you're probably writing unit tests, and I think with those unit tests, this is the ideal thing to do. I pretty much do this on every unit test in Angular. For a component, I add schemas, no errors schema, and it helps out a lot. So the second tip and set of tips, I guess, that I want to talk about are related to code coverage. So for code coverage, there's a couple things I do. For one, you saw I was running npm run test once. Well, I've also got npm run test cov. And when I run that, I'll see the output of my coverage in the terminal here. And that's very helpful to know what you've covered and what you haven't covered when you're trying to unit test your work. All right, so I can see I'm missing some coverage here in my page component. We'll come back to that momentarily, but I want to talk about how this works. So you probably haven't seen this type of a view if you're just running default Angular stuff. So one of the things, this is what Angular comes with, is just ng test. So my test once, I configured it to run in a headless browser to do no watch, no progress, just so I can run it once and it stops. And then I also work off of that command to create my code coverage command. So this is where the code coverage gets generated. But you also have to make some changes to your Karma comp file to get this specific output. So I believe text summary is what comes in here by default. And if you just take away the summary part and leave it at text, you get a more information. You get this type of a view with this text here. Now, the other thing you might notice in this Karma Conf is I've got these thresholds defined that are all set to 100. So if you've noticed, all of my tests passed. I got 5 success messages, but I have a failure. And the reason for that failure is these thresholds. You can see coverage for statements, 94.44%, doesn't meet global threshold of 100. So you can define your minimum coverage thresholds for branches, which is going to be things like if statements, functions, lines, and statements. So personally, I prefer to set these all to 100 just to make sure I maintain 100% coverage. That's not necessary for most people. You can set it to whatever you feel is appropriate, whether that be 95, 90, 80, whatever you want. You can set your minimums here, and it'll just kind of help enforce that in your projects. So if I go and I say, okay, well, line 13 of the page component is not covered, and it's this unused method. It's like, okay, I can get rid of that. Don't even need the method because it's not used. Let's rerun the npm run test cov, and this time we should get 100% coverage. And there we go. This time we got 100% coverage. All the tests passed, no failures, everything's good to go. So this is the command that I'll typically run in my CI/CD pipelines, so that I can make sure when people like submit pull requests and things like that, that the coverage is adequate. And meets kind of our expectations for the project. So that's all I've got for this video. Just wanted to give these few quick tips to help out your unit testing productivity in Angular. I hope you found this helpful. I'll definitely cover some more tips on this type of stuff in some future videos. If there's any tips that you think I should know about or should share with others, feel free to leave those in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content, and I'll catch you next time.